welcome to my channel. My name is Emily and this is my channel Books for Life, and today I'm here to talk about all the books that I read during the month of March. Now, March was actually my best reading month yet. I read 9 different books, and so I am going to put this video into 2 separate parts. First, I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read for March Mystery Madness, which I participated in, and I hit every single book on my TBR, which is very exciting. And then I'm going to have a second video where I talk about all the other books that I happened to read during the month of March. So let's get started. For March Mystery Madness, I set out to read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, No Exit by Taylor Adams, These Shallow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly, and Final Girls by Riley Sager. Now, I did end up reading all of these. I actually ended up listening to most of them instead of actually reading the physical copies, even though I owned most of them. But let's start with the first one that I listened to. And the first one that I listened to was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 star rating. Overall, I enjoyed this story. I was captivated. I was immersed. I wanted to keep listening. However, I didn't love the narrator. I ended up borrowing this from my library. I really did like it. The narrator, though, I felt like she didn't always do a great job about keeping her voices different or distinct, and sometimes there wasn't a tagline, and so I struggled sometimes with realizing who was actually talking and who wasn't, and so that took away from it. And then, I know this is like a really weird critique, but the dialogue started with the word yes so many times that I actually became irritated with it because the narrator would read it the exact same way every single time. And I could actually begin to predict when the dialogue would start with the word yes and then like move forward from there. I just thought that that was so repetitive and so like monotonous. I just became really bored with that. Overall, this was a very interesting mystery thriller. So this is a novel about a mom who is like now in her 50s, and she is dealing with the fact that about 10 years ago, her youngest daughter went missing and she never heard anything. The authorities kind of just like gave up. Nothing ever came of it and they never knew what to make of it. And so her life was supposed to just kind of like move on, but she really couldn't move on from it. And so this goes from like the present time with the mom trying to move on, and then it does flashbacks. So before the daughter went missing, and then while the daughter was missing and what actually happened with her and with the family. And so you do learn what happened to the daughter, which was kind of predictable, which took away from the plot a little bit. So the mom, who like I said is in her 50s and who has struggled to overcome this loss, ends up going to this coffee shop and she meets this guy and she kind of falls head over heels for him, and things escalate kind of quickly, and she ends up meeting his 2 children. And now he has one child who's like early 20s and then a 9-year-old, and the 9-year-old daughter looks exactly like her old daughter, the one who went missing. And so she ends up going like kind of attached to her because it's like the girl that she lost, and the story goes from there. It was, like I said, a captivating story, but it was highly predictable. The next book that I read was No Exit by Taylor Adams, and this book was so hyped during the month of January because that's when this came out. This was my book of the month pick, if you can see that. And I had such high expectations for it. And so I actually downloaded it on Audible and I was listening to it, and I was going to read and listen at the same time. It's about this young woman named Darby who's on her way home from college because she has found out that her mom has pancreatic cancer. And so she is trying to get home before her mom goes into surgery. And she ends up, as she's crossing the Rockies, getting stuck in this massive snowstorm, and she has to pull over at like a thruway rest stop. And as she's outside trying to like find service for her cell phone, she happens to like peek into somebody else's car who's obviously at the rest stop, and she sees a hand, and she is immediately like, what the heck is this? And investigates further to find out that a young girl who I think was like 7 years old is locked in a dog crate in the back of this van. Now she has no idea what to do. She has no idea whose van it is, and she has to now figure out how she's going to save this girl and make sure that no one else gets caught in the crossfire. So this is her story. It was a very interesting thriller, and I'm going to be honest, I ended up like DNFing this, kind of. Okay, so I was listening to the audio version of it and I became so bored with the internal dialogue because Darby has to just like agonize over every single thing, and she goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I became so bored with the dialogue that I ended up returning the audiobook, and then I just sat on the couch and I just skimmed it. And I would skip whole pages of internal dialogue to just get to the action part. Now, I think it's important to note that I wanted to know what happened. Like, I was invested enough in this story that I wanted to know how things turned out and what happened when and why and how, that I did want to skim it. I wasn't okay with just DNFing it. So I think that gives this book a little bit of merit. I was not willing to invest the amount of time that this book would have taken me to listen to it completely. And when I was skimming it, some of the action, some of the plot events that happened just shook me. Like, I could not believe some of the things that happened. It is definitely a gruesome book. There are definitely some like violent trigger warnings. If that will trigger you, then just like go into this book with some caution. It's dark, it's twisted. There were definitely plot twists that I did not see coming, but I don't know that I would have listened to this book if I didn't have the ability to just skim it. So I am only giving this a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Let me know if you read this and what your thoughts were, but this was definitely a letdown for me. This is not one that I put in my classroom library, by the way. And then I ended up reading These Shallow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly, and I really did enjoy this book. Now, this book is about this main character named Jo Montfort, and this takes place in the late 1800s, and Jo is at like this finishing school, and she's supposed to marry like a wealthy man and, you know, like just like live the rest of her life, like, you know, going to like party events and socializing and blah, blah, blah. And Jo really actually wants to be a writer, and that's what she really enjoys to do. So like that part of her life isn't quite what she wants. Jo ends up getting the shocking news that her father has died, and she does not know quite how to handle this. And she begins asking all of these questions, and the answers that she gets to those questions to her do not add up. So she ends up teaming up with this man named Eddie, who is a journalist for a newspaper that her father actually owned, and they set off on a mission to discover what really happened to her father. I did really enjoy the historical aspect of this. I thought that brought a whole new level. I loved some of the side characters. I think some of the best side characters I've ever read are definitely from this book, like this guy named Oscar. He works in the morgue, and he was really funny. I really enjoyed his character. I thought he added a whole new like dynamic to the story. And even Eddie too, the guy that she teams up with from the newspaper, I thought brought a whole new element and a whole new dynamic to the story. Jo, I liked her as a main protagonist. She was determined and strong-willed, and she definitely isn't afraid to get her hands dirty, which I think says a lot for like the time period where a lot of women are content to just like marry the rich guy and let him do his thing, and so she can just kind of like live the easy life. So I really did enjoy her. The plot was predictable, but then it got like heated when I wasn't expecting it to get as heated as it did, even though I could predict how it would turn out. There really weren't that many plot twists. A lot of the things that I had anticipated happened, but overall it was a really good story. This was probably my favorite read out of all of the ones that I did read for my March Mystery Madness. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I am really happy to finally get this off my TBR shelf and into my classroom. And the final book that I read / listened to was Final Girls by Riley Sager. This is another one that I will not put in my classroom library. I don't know, is it a book that I feel like I need to put in there? And so I'd rather just put it in that thrift store that I go to in town where I can get some like store credit and buy other books that are more YA. But this is about this woman named Quincy Carpenter who ends up surviving a massacre at Pine Cottage, which is where she was staying for the weekend with a group of her friends from college. And so it's been 10 years and Quincy is still, you know, trying to get over this traumatic event, and she's not the only what they call final girl, the only like lone survivor who has survived a massacre. There are 2 others, Lisa and Sam, and they all have like their own story, but they're all survivors of these massacres, and they kind of like talk to each other at some points throughout, but then Lisa ends up dying. Kind of brings Sam and Quincy together, and they're trying to figure out like what happened to Lisa and what happened to them. And it was interesting. There was definitely a plot twist at the end that I did not anticipate, although I don't know that I like it. I like that I couldn't guess the plot twist, but I don't know that I like it in a sense that it makes sense with the rest of the story. It kind of seems like the plot twist was kind of just like put there for the shock value, but I don't know if it was the best plot twist to have been there. I feel like there could have been something else. I don't know what, but overall, I thought it was okay. I believe I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you're interested in thrillers and thrillers really your favorite genre, maybe you would enjoy reading it. I don't think I will ever read it again. I think I have another Riley Sager book and maybe I'll read that one, but I don't know. I wasn't blown away by it. So these are the books that I read for March Mystery Madness, plus Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I really hope that you like this wrap up. If you do, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know what books did you read during the March Mystery Madness if you participated. If you didn't, what other books did you read during the month of March? I'd love to hear from you. Please leave it a comment below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe, and I'll be back with part 2 of my March wrap up. So stay tuned for that. It will be here shortly. Thank you so much for watching. As always, keep reading.